Gam Vashti Hamalka Asisa Mishtei Nashim Beis Hamalchus Asher Lamelech Achashverosh. Also, Queen Vashti made a women's party in the royal household of King Achashverosh. So why was it necessary to say Asher Lamelech Achashverosh? That was to King Achashverosh. Once it tells us that the party was taking place in the Beis HaMalchus, in the royal house, clearly we know that it was the house of Melech Achashverosh. So the Ateres Zahav explains that why was Achashverosh making the party? So as we've discussed in the past, his party was to celebrate the fact that in his opinion, the Beis Hamikdash would never be rebuilt, the temple would never be rebuilt, and therefore his monarchy was firm and solid. So that's what the emphasis over here is, that Vashti also was celebrating her idea that the Beis Hamikdash would never be rebuilt. And that's why it was Beis HaMalchus Asher Lamelech Achashverosh, to explain that they were celebrating the fact that in their mindset, they could be sure that the Beis Hamikdash would never be rebuilt. Furthermore, he points out, it says Vashti HaMalka made a Mishtei Nashim, a women's party. It doesn't say Mishtei Lid Nashim, a party for women. And therefore the Ateres Zahav suggests that the women were the party. The women were the feast, because we mentioned earlier that Haman's plot was to seduce the Jewish people to sin. So that's why Vashti essentially brought over boatloads of women in order to tempt those Jews who were attending the party to sin. And the way that was facilitated was, as we said in the previous pasuk, Hashtiyah kadas ein ones, that the drinking was according to the law and there was no force. And then the pasuk immediately segues into this about Vashti. So he explains that he got the people to drink so much that once they were all drunk, nobody had to force them to go commit any sexual impropriety. It just happened by itself because of what Vashti Hamalka arranged. In a completely different vein, in the Kabbalistic side of things, he explains on the idea of the drinking being according to the law, nobody was forced. He wants to suggest that this refers to the punishment that was ultimately to come upon the enemies of the Jews in the Purim story. And he says the drinking over here is the shtias kos hatar'ela, the drinking of the cup of poison that we see in the Nevi'im and the prophets that Hashem gives ultimately to the nations of the world. And the is referring to the punishment that they ultimately receive because of their mistreatment of Klal Yisrael. And why is that k'das? Why is that according to the rule? So he quotes a Tikkunei Zohar that says, woe to the angel Samol, because when Hashem comes to free the Shekhinah and his children of Israel, he is going to demand from them and from all of their appointees for all of the suffering that they caused Klal Yisrael to suffer in exile. Why is that? Because prior to exiling the Jewish people, Hashem let the celestial representatives of the nations know that he was giving Klal Yisrael over under their jurisdiction. And he told them about the reward that they would receive if they would treat Klal Yisrael in a respectful manner during their exile. Like we find, for example, when Yosef was imprisoned in the house of Potiphar, it says, Vayevarech Hashem es beis hamitzri beglal Yosef. that Hashem blessed the house of the Egyptian because of Yosef. But however, Samol and his appointees did not treat Klal Yisrael with respect, but rather they treated them in a demeaning manner. One way the Zohar says is by constantly ridiculing their religious beliefs. So therefore we see in the Zohar that Hashem had revealed to these celestial representatives the reward that they would get for treating Klal Yisrael properly, as well as the converse. And therefore, when he gives them to drink ultimately that kos ha-ter'ela, so that's fair because it fits in to the original deal. It's not something that is coming without their notice, but they were informed ahead of time. Pasuk goes on to say, Bayom HaShvi, on the seventh day, Kitov Lev HaMelech Bayayin, when the king's heart was good with wine, he said to his 7 officers to bring Vashti with the royal crown. So he explains that the 7th day is indicating what we've discussed in the past about Achashverosh having filled and taken all of the Kedusha, the holiness, from the 7 lower spheros and bringing them over to the side of impurity. And that's why the heart of the king was full of wine, because now he controlled everything, all of the goodness that God pours out to the world was now going to be channeled through Achashverosh. And he spoke to his 7 officers, again, corresponding to the 7 lower spheros, to bring Vashti. Vashti represents the lowest level of the holiness, or in this case, the unholiness, the malchus, the recipient of all of the goodness, and she should come with the royal crown to show that which they have now captured from the side of holiness. What was the purpose? To show the nations and the officers her beauty. Now she had beauty. Previously, there was no beauty to show off, because the side of klipa, the side of impurity, doesn't have beauty. But now that it had taken all of the powers of kedusha, of holiness, the powers of Yerushalayim, which had been klilas yofi, the epitome of beauty, and now was taken to that side, Achashverosh wanted to show off the resultant beauty that came from stealing all of that kedusha. He says that's also why the pasuk says kitovas mar'ehi, that she was beautiful in appearance. It doesn't really say the word yafa, that she was beautiful. It just says that she appeared beautiful. And the reason for that is because the beauty was not really hers and was not inherent to her, but it was stolen beauty. So that's why while she appeared beautiful, she was not in reality beautiful herself. Vatima'ina Malka Vashti, Queen Vashti refused lavo, to come bidvar hamelech, with the king's word, even though normally Vashti was known for not exactly exhibiting the highest amount of modesty. But in this case, because she was being told, no one's going to tell Vashti what to do. And that was the reason for her refusal. Why did Achashverosh want her to come aruma, naked? So the Ateres Zahav wants to explain that one of the major aspects of the Sitra Achra is that it always wants to appear as if it is really the side of holiness. He doesn't mention this, but Chazal tell us, for example, that the pig sticks out its hooves as if to tell you, look, I'm kosher, even though it's really not kosher because it doesn't chew its cud. But the pig looks like it's kosher, even though in reality, internally, it is not kosher. And he says that's why we find the word Gam Vashti Hamalka, because that's what Vashti was. She was a Gam person. She was an also person, because her entire being on the side of the impurity was to try to make a look as if she was really the side of holiness. We find that also in the story of Eov, of Job, where it says, Vayovo Gam HaSatan, also the Satan showed up. The same word Gam also, because the Satan is that also, trying to show that he is also holy. So he explains that just like we know that 3 times a year by the Shalosh Regalim, the 3 pilgrimage festivals. So I think we mentioned this earlier, that not only are we meant to appear in the Beis Hamikdash before Hashem, but Hashem appears before us. So because of the Gam, the also, Achashverosh wanted that now the side of impurity should also reveal itself before the people in order that it should be similar to the side of holiness. Alternatively, he suggests that also, as we've discussed beforehand, that Achashverosh had the big day kuhuna, the clothing of the Kohen Gadol, of the high priest. And he was afraid that if she would show up wearing those vestments, then people would say, you see, it's not really her beauty, it's stolen beauty. So he wanted to try to show that she should come naked in order to try to show that she had inherent beauty and not just stolen beauty. Thank you for listening.